welcome to the Split and MixPanel integration video, Pro Moves. Why Pro Moves? Because in this video, we're going to cover in depth setting up a multivariate experiment in Split, then seeing the Split impressions caught in MixPanel. With those impressions, we can then set up cohorts in MixPanel and actually analyze an entire experiment, at least a single event or two's worth of it, right in MixPanel. Then we're going to come back to Split to see what the experiment looks like on the Split side, what the difference might be in analyzing between those two. So first, let's look at a multivariate experiment in Split. I'm going to come to my splits on the nav bar and find an experiment called Radium that I've set up here in advance. In the production area, the rules I've set are for 4 variants: V1, V2, V3, and V4. If I look at how the rule is targeted, I've evenly split treatments across each of those variants. So that means that as experiment subjects approach, there's a 1 in 4 chance that they'll be assigned to any one of those given variants. It's a very simple experiment. If you visit help.split.io, you'll find on the left nav bar a section of integration. Here it says integrate, and underneath MixPanel. If you go to the MixPanel integration, there are instructions for setting up Split and MixPanel working together. In particular, you set up an impressions webhook. You can do it either with the Google Cloud or Java AWS Lambda, or really there are other options that you have at your available. I'm not going to cover all the details of this integration during this video, but I want you to see that this information is available. Next, we're going to see the output this integration gives us. Now in MixPanel, I've gone to Data Management and the Live View. And in the Live View, I can see a stream of events that are arriving. You can see there's a bunch of experiments started events in this case. If you've set up the integration between Split and MixPanel properly, you will see experiment started events. If you look carefully inside of them, you'll see that they have an experiment name. In this case, it's Radium, just like we saw a moment ago, and a variant name. This particular experiment started event was for V3. This is critical for success moving forward. You need to see these experiments started events. If you have them, then your integration is set up properly and you'll be able to proceed with the instructions in this Pro Moves video. All right, now that Split is reporting all these experiment started events to MixPanel, we're ready to do experiment analysis, but we have to take one more step. We have to turn experiment started events into cohorts. So let's do this together. If we come to the users menu and we ask for cohorts, we can create a new cohort, and it's for that Radium experiment we've been looking at. This one will do variant 1 or V1 and save. So when I come into the cohort, right now it's for all users, but we need to be more selective, of course. The experiment started event, and then filter by experiment name. So in this case, the experiment name is going to be Radium. We'll add that filter, and then we need to add one more filter because this includes everybody in the experiment. We want to include just those that are in variant V1. And now we can save. We need to do this once for each of the 4 cohorts. So I'm going to do 2, 3, and 4 off camera, and then we'll come back together in just a moment. All right, I've created all 4 of my cohorts, Radium V1 through Radium V4. And you'll notice the counts look pretty good. V2, V3, V4 have close to the same amount of count for each of them. Radium V1 has a much higher count. We can talk about how this could happen. It has to do with sequencing and the way that MixPanel handles the Split data versus how Split handles an experiment. But this is the good picture. And if you've got an experiment with even just 2 variants, you should be able to detect the different cohorts at this level. So let's see what we can do with these cohorts. If you want to look at the results of an experiment, you have to look through the lens of an event, or maybe more than one event. If we go back to data management into live view, we were looking at experiments started before, but there should be other information in the system. In particular, for my experiment, there's something called the unobtainium number that's in the system. So these unobtainium millisecond latency events, this is event traffic that MixPanel is recording independent of Split. It does not have anything to do with Split. We can look at the properties and we can see this value was close to 5,000, reported 16 minutes ago, and there's a distinct ID in it that's going to join with this distinct ID from the split experiment started events. So let's ask ourselves a question of how the unobtainium millisecond event traffic fields looked like in the different variants of the experiment. So to do that, we'll go to Analysis and Insights. And here we're going to find our event. Unobtainium should be in our list here. There it is. And unobtainium is a latency, so I'm going to go ahead and aggregate with an average property. And we'll take the average from the value of the event. So this is all going to be event specific, but it should be pretty familiar to customers of Mixpanel. Now, here's the excellent part. We're going to do a breakdown or a group by, and we're going to do it with our cohorts. So I'm going to pick my radium V1 and radium V2. Here, we'll click to select the cohorts, V2, V3, V4. I think it's a little gotcha that they're showing up doubled. And now we've got our breakdown. I'll switch from line to bar chart, and let's have a look at the performance of unobtainium. So it looks like in V1, the value for unobtainium latency was 2,500. For V2, it was roughly twice that, 5.1 thousand. For V3, it doubled again to 10,000, and for V4, it doubled to 20,000. So this turns out to be exactly the value that was reported. This metric is a controlled metric in this case, meant to display how you can see the different variants. But this is Mixpanel and Split doing their best at analytics here, showing the difference between these different variants. So this is exciting because in this case, we're looking at the last 30 days worth of cohorts and any event traffic that came in for unobtainium for them. So this is one great way to look at experiment results. And the pro moves brought you here. We have one more stop in the video before we're finished. Split has a lot of different views for an experiment, but in the metrics scorecard, if you look inside a metric, you can get this type of view for the values over time for that particular metric. And here we can see Split displaying, hey, that V1 is at the 2,500, V2 is at the 5,000, V3 10,000, V4 20,000. Of course, with real data, these values would fluctuate a lot more. Split is also doing a t-test. It's calculating the p-value on the metrics, so we can decide if the results are statistically significant in the experiment. And Split also does something very important called sequencing. While Mixpanel doesn't necessarily understand when the experiment begins, Split has a timestamp for when the user entered the experiment. So any event data that came before the user entered the experiment would not be included in the results. With Mixpanel, the cohorts are bringing in all of the data across the timeline that they're initialized. So both tools are very powerful. You can definitely rely on Split for some of the more in-depth analysis. So we took a multivariant experiment in Split, followed it into Mixpanel, built cohorts in Mixpanel, did analysis in Mixpanel of the experiment, and then came back to Split to see what Split had to say about the same results. This is using Split and Mixpanel to their full advantage. We hope you've enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching. My name is David Martin. You can email me david.martin@split.io. I'd be happy to answer your questions about Split and Mixpanel. Thank you for your time.